The morning sun crept slowly over the crowded streets of Manila, lighting up the rusted rooftops and the tiny alleys where children played barefoot. Lien woke to the soft sound of tricycles driving by and the rumble of vendors setting up their carts. His stomach growled before he even stood up, a reminder that last night's dinner had been nothing more than a cup of warm water and a piece of bread. Still, he forced a smile. Hunger was familiar, but hope was stronger. He washed his face using a small plastic bowl filled with cold water, then packed a torn sack with empty plastic bottles he hoped to sell. On his way to school, he hummed quietly, testing his voice. Even with no breakfast, his vocals held a natural warmth. People walking by glanced at him, some recognizing him as the street singer boy who sang love songs in exchange for coins. When he reached the recycling shop, he placed the bottles on the counter. The worker gave him a few pesos, barely enough for rice, but Lien thanked him sincerely as if he'd handed him a treasure. At home, his mother waited with tired eyes and a soft smile that hid her own hunger. She kissed his forehead, told him she was proud, and encouraged him to keep singing no matter what. Their small home was dim, the walls thin, but it was filled with love that made every hardship bearable. That afternoon, as Lien practiced a song for a local school event, a flyer blew across the street, landing at his feet. It was for auditions for America's Got Talent. He stared at it in disbelief. America felt like another planet. The idea of paying for travel was laughable. He showed it to his mother, expecting her to chuckle. Instead, she looked at him with a serious, hopeful gaze he had never seen before. The news spread through their neighborhood, and something unexpected happened. People began offering what little they had. A man who barely earned enough for himself sold his old radio and handed the money to Lien. An elderly woman dug out coins she had saved over months. Even children searched the streets for bottles to contribute. It wasn't just support, it was love, generosity, and belief that went beyond poverty. Days later, Lien stood at the airport with shaking legs and a borrowed backpack. His passport was new, his ticket paid by neighbors who believed he could do something extraordinary. When he hugged his mother goodbye, she whispered, "You carry all our dreams with you." He boarded the plane with only one change of clothes and a heart overflowing with determination. As the plane lifted into the sky, leaving the Philippines below, Lien looked out the window and quietly whispered, "Mama, I'll make you proud." When Lien stepped outside the Los Angeles airport, he felt like he had stepped onto another planet. Cars sped past him with a confidence he wasn't used to, skyscrapers gleamed in the sunlight, and everyone seemed to be in a rush. His eyes widened at everything, the bright billboards, the giant palm trees, the smell of food from restaurants he couldn't afford. Even the air felt different, lighter, filled with possibility. He clutched his tiny backpack, nervous but excited. He stayed in a cheap shared hostel using the little money he had left. The room smelled like old socks, and the mattress was thin, but Lien didn't care. He was in America, chasing a dream. During the days leading up to his audition, he practiced at a small park near Santa Monica. People walking their dogs or jogging stopped to listen to him sing. Some dropped $1 or $2 in his cup. That money kept him fed, simple sandwiches, instant noodles, and bottled water. At night, he borrowed the hostel Wi-Fi and video called his mother, assuring her that he was safe, even when he hadn't eaten enough. She always told him to trust God, trust his voice, and trust his purpose. On one particular day, while singing at the park, a little girl tugged on her mother's hand and said, "Mom, he sings like an angel." The mother, touched by Lien's voice, started a conversation with him. When she learned he came from the Philippines alone with almost nothing, she and her family invited him to their home for dinner. It was the first full meal he'd had in days, and he nearly cried when they offered him clean clothes and a simple haircut for his audition. Their kindness made him feel less alone in a huge, unfamiliar world. Audition day arrived, and Lien barely slept from nerves. He looked at himself in the mirror wearing the donated outfit, clean, neat, simple. He touched the fabric and whispered, "Thank you, God." When he arrived at the AGT building, the crowd overwhelmed him. Hundreds of people waited with instruments, costumes, props, and flashy outfits. Lien felt small, like he didn't belong. But then he remembered the people back home, the sacrifices they made, the coins dropped into his hand, his mother's hopeful smile. He took a deep breath and walked through the doors, receiving a contestant sticker with shaky fingers. Backstage, surrounded by dancers stretching and magicians practicing tricks, Lien clenched his hands together to stop them from trembling. His name was finally called. As he stepped toward the stage entrance, he felt the weight of Manila, of hunger, of hope, all sitting on his shoulders. Right before he walked onto the stage, he whispered to himself, "This is for Mama. This is for home." And with that, he stepped into the spotlight and into the next chapter of his life. The moment Lien stepped onto the AGT stage, the bright lights hit him like a wave, and his breath caught in his throat. The stage was massive, far bigger than any street corner, school stage, or community event he had ever sung at. The audience stretched across the theater, hundreds of faces watching him curiously. The judges' table gleamed under the lights, and Lien's eyes briefly met the familiar faces he had only ever seen through a small phone screen. Simon leaned back, arms crossed, studying him with a serious expression. Sophia smiled gently. Heidi looked curious. Howie raised his eyebrows as if silently asking, "What do you have for us today?" Lien held the microphone with both hands to hide the shaking. When he introduced himself, his voice cracked slightly. He explained that he came from the Philippines, that he used to sing on the streets to help buy food, and that he was standing on the AGT stage because an entire neighborhood believed in him enough to send him here. As he spoke, the theater grew quiet, the kind of quiet that meant everyone was listening, really listening. Simon tilted his head, interested now in a way that felt deeper than just judging a performance. The music started, soft and slow. Lien closed his eyes for a moment, picturing the streets of Manila, the recycled bottles he collected, his mother's tired but proud smile. When he opened his eyes again, something inside him unlocked. His first note floated into the air, gentle and controlled. People in the audience leaned forward. The second verse swelled with emotion, his voice gaining strength, the tone shaking slightly, not from fear, but from the rawness of his story. By the time he hit the first high note, the audience erupted in cheers. The camera zoomed in on Sophia wiping away a tear. Heidi's eyes widened in surprise. Simon leaned forward, hands clasped, lips slightly parted as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Lien kept going, pouring every hardship and dream, every hungry night and hopeful morning, into the song. When he reached the final note, a powerful, soaring note that felt too big to come from such a small, fragile-looking boy, the entire room rose to its feet. As the last note echoed through the theater, Lien lowered his microphone, chest rising and falling with each breath. He didn't know whether to cry or smile, so he did a little of both. The standing ovation lasted longer than he expected. People clapped, shouted, whistled, and cheered his name even though they had only just learned it. When the crowd finally settled, Howie stood and said, "You're the reason people watch this show." Heidi praised his soul and emotional expression. Sophia told him he reminded the world that talent lives everywhere, even in the hardest places. And then all eyes turned to Simon. Simon looked at him for a moment, silent, thoughtful. Then he stood up and said, "Lien, every once in a while, someone comes to this stage and reminds us why we're here. You're special." With a slow, deliberate motion, Simon reached for the golden buzzer. The theater exploded as golden confetti burst from the ceiling. Lien dropped to his knees, hands over his face, sobbing with joy. People cheered louder than ever as Simon walked onto the stage, shook his hand, and told him, "You deserve this." Through tears, Lien whispered, "Mama, this is for you," knowing she would see this moment on TV back home. That night, Lien's life changed forever. The world moved too fast after the golden buzzer moment. One day Lien was a street singer from Manila, the next, he was trending online across the United States. News outlets published articles about the hungry but hopeful Filipino singer. Clips of his audition went viral on social media. People commented from every part of the world, praising his courage, his voice, and the community that helped send him to America. Lien wasn't used to this level of attention. At times it thrilled him, but other times it overwhelmed him. Producers scheduled interviews, photo shoots, and rehearsals. He visited a music school in Los Angeles for the first time, and the instructors there listened to him with admiration, giving him tips to strengthen his voice. They taught him breath control, warm-ups, and stage presence techniques he had never heard of. He soaked it all in like a sponge, grateful for every opportunity. But with each new experience came a growing pressure. People expected more from him now, more than just a street performance, more than a viral moment. One evening, after a long day of filming behind-the-scenes content, Lien sat alone on a rooftop overlooking the city. The air was cool, and the lights stretched across the horizon like a sea of stars. He hugged his knees, feeling the weight of everything. He wondered if he could really live up to the hype. What if his next performance disappoints everyone? What if he fails? His throat tightened as fear crept into his heart. He dialed his mother. When she answered, her voice was warm and steady. Lien confessed everything: the pressure, the fear, the feeling of being too small in such a big world. She listened quietly and then said in her gentle tone, "My son, you were enough even before that golden buzzer. You were enough when you sang in the streets. You sing from your heart. That is your gift. Don't forget who you are." Her words soothed him like a soft melody. He wiped his tears and promised her he would stay true to himself. The next morning, he walked into rehearsal with renewed determination. The production team greeted him warmly, excited to prepare him for the quarterfinals. Rehearsals were intense. He practiced choreography, vocal technique, and camera blocking. Sometimes he struggled with difficult notes. Sometimes exhaustion made him frustrated. But every time he faltered, someone encouraged him: the vocal coach, the stage director, even other contestants. He began to feel like he was part of something bigger, a family of dreamers chasing the same impossible dream. As show night approached, the pressure built again, but this time he was ready. He visited the stage during sound check, looking out at the empty seats that would soon be filled with thousands of expectant faces. He took a deep breath, imagining the cheers, imagining his mother watching him from halfway across the world. Backstage on the day of the quarterfinal rehearsals, lights buzzed, stagehands hurried around, and contestants whispered last-minute pep talks to themselves. Lien stood in the wings, staring at the massive stage where his future would unfold. He held onto his microphone and whispered, "Stay humble. Stay grateful. Sing from the heart." As he walked into rehearsal with the music beginning to play, he felt something new: not fear, but purpose. This was no longer just about making it was about honoring every sacrifice, every person who believed in him. The episode ends with him hitting the first note in rehearsal, stronger and clearer than ever, ready for what comes next. The days leading up to the quarterfinals were filled with both excitement and anxiety. Lien